Good afternoon. I'm Brad Nickerson for Tri-City Community Television. We're here in Lee Square in downtown Port Coquitlam. Today I'm joined by Morag and Ariel from the activist group Fight C with an F, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming today. And what I'd like to do today is just discuss Site C and what that means to British Columbia as we're going forward. Because as far as I understand, Site C has already started. They've already spent over $1 billion on it. And yet, if I'm not mistaken, you want us to stop that. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your organization, what you want to do, and then you could explain to us how can we stop Site C when it's already so much money has been spent on it.
That's a great question. So our group is a local grassroots group, and we started in response to what was happening up in the Peace River. And we wanted to raise awareness locally in an urban center because this issue can often feel removed for people, and it's hard to see how exactly it can fit into people's daily lives. But it actually will have a huge impact on individual British Columbians. In terms of how much we're spending from our own tax money on this project. And you said that we've already spent over $1 billion on the clearing of the land and the pre-construction process. So what we want to put forward is that now would be a great time to halt construction before we have spent so much more and gone further down this path and gotten ourselves further into debt for individual British Columbians. Do you want to add to that?
I understand that you're saying that we can stop it now. Like I'm going to get right into it right away. There are people who are working there, who have jobs, who have mortgages and have bought houses, and this is a tough issue for them.
Totally.
What do you want to say to those people? I'm going to ask you more. What do you think we can do for those people going into the future?
Yeah, I think we're in a really unfortunate position because a lot of people are relying on these jobs, and jobs in rural areas is a really important issue for a lot of British Columbians. But I think it's important for us to look at not only the costs of Site C for all British Columbians with our hydro bills going up and so forth, but also at the opportunities for jobs in other industries where we could be investing instead of spending $8.8 billion on a dam we actually don't need. So for example, if we invested that money into the renewable energy industry, which has been devastated by Site C, if we invested in wind and solar and geothermal projects in communities across BC, we would create hundreds, if not thousands of jobs in those communities, good, stable, long-term jobs that would provide work for the workers who are currently working on Site C.
So are you saying, Ariel, that what we could do, is your organization behind this saying what we could do is put money into the very communities that Site C would take jobs from? If we stopped Site C, those jobs would be lost but we could put investment into that community. Is that what you're proposing?
Well, one of the problems is that Site C is not employing entirely local labor. So people are traveling long distances to work these short-term and often very dangerous jobs. So what we would love to see are local jobs created that are long-term, sustainable, and less dangerous for folks to work in their own communities, so they don't have to be away from their families for long periods of time, and they don't have to move around from job to job. And we could create local infrastructure projects that would be much more long-term.
Okay, so you're saying that we could do this, we could employ more British Columbians by going a different route with regards to that. Now, let's talk a little bit about Site C in terms of what is going on there on the ground, so that people understand what's happening right there, right now. Have they poured concrete for the dam? Have they started that sort of thing? Where are they at with it right now? Do you know that?
So they've done a lot of logging, which is really unfortunate because they have destroyed a lot of really great forests that didn't need to be destroyed. I believe they've done some road construction, which has not gone super well because the land is quite unstable there, and they've built the quarters for workers to be housed in. But as far as I understand, there has not been a lot of the actual work of the dam begun.
So the Premier has said that she wanted to, before this election, which is on the May 9th,
That's right.
that she wanted to get this past a point of no return. Are you saying that we're not at a point of no return at this point?
We're definitely not at a point of no return. That's also kind of a nebulous, intangible point that doesn't necessarily really exist. My view is that it's a marketing tactic to call something a point of no return when I don't believe it really exists. I do believe that now would be a great time to halt construction while there's a proper assessment. Part of the problem is that this project was allowed to bypass the traditional assessment process.
Right.
The panel of experts called the BC Utilities Commission, which actually deems whether a project on this scale is in the best interests of British Columbians. And because it wasn't reviewed by that panel, we actually don't have concrete evidence that this is good for British Columbians. And so now would be a great time for there to be a proper assessment before any more construction happens.
Okay. We do know, though, that our province is growing in terms of the population. We're expanding. All communities are seeing influx of people coming into their communities. So we know that that's true by the fact that we have a housing shortage. And there's not enough housing for the amounts of people that we have. Mm-hmm. By the same token, our energy needs, electricity, are going to go up. How can we say that we don't need a Site C as we go into the future? Can you answer that?
Totally. Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's one of the really important things about Site C is, do we need that energy? And I think the answer that we are seeing from experts who are looking at this project is no, we don't. So BC's energy usage has been pretty flat.
Wait, yeah. I'm going to stop you for a second. We know that we all want to push towards electric cars, electric use instead of carbon-based fuels. We all want that. In order to do that, I have heard and read that we need upwards of 5 or 6 Site Cs to deal with that demand for electricity. How can you say we don't need the electricity?
Well, partly looking at BC Hydro's own numbers. So back in the 1980s, when Site C was first proposed, BC Hydro's estimates showed a doubling of demand for hydroelectricity. And yet we haven't actually reached the point that they thought we were going to reach by now. In fact, demand has looked pretty flat. And a lot of experts are saying that it looks like we won't actually even need the amount of power that Site C will create for at least 10 years after the dam is finished being constructed. So as far as that goes, we actually don't need Site C for at least 10 years after construction finishes. But even at that point, there are at least half a dozen alternatives that we could do if we did need more energy. So for example, investing in solar, wind, geothermal, and other renewables is a really great alternative to the power that Site C would produce.
They're alternatives, but and so I'm playing devil's advocate with you.
Yeah.
What about the expense of those? Those are expensive. We are just investing, learning about that stuff. Those are expensive methods of power production, are they not?
Yeah, so one thing I would say in response to that is if you decide to spend $9 to $14 billion in one direction on one project, which may or may not be a good idea, you're not going to explore all the other options because you've really committed to going down that one path. So if we're committing to going towards building this dam, which the electricity from which I don't believe that we're going to need, we're certainly not going to be exploring those other options in the meantime.
So you're saying that by exploring those options, we would bring the price down of those particular options?
Yes, that's totally true. There are also other hydroelectric options, and there are other dams in BC that are not being used at full capacity, where we could be gaining a bunch of more electricity as well. Then those options aren't being explored either.
Okay, so I've been hard on you on that part of things. I'm going to ask you another question with regards to Site Cs being mentioned as a very green method of creating energy. Mm-hmm. Can you enlighten us on that? Either.
Do you want to talk?
Sure. I think that's pretty questionable. It's
questionable that electricity from a dam is not green energy.
It is questionable that electricity from Site C would be greener than other forms of electricity that we have options for. So massive hydroelectric dams do release methane into the atmosphere. So the vegetation that is flooded by the massive reservoir for these dams rots and releases lots and lots of methane.
Right.
But when it comes to whether a dam is green or not, we have to look at more than just the the climate change aspect of the dam.
Right.
We also have to look at the impact on local environment and environment downstream. So not only is the Peace Valley a beautiful and rich biodiverse region with lots of habitat for a number of different species, Site C will also impact the Athabasca Delta in Alberta, which is downstream of the Peace. And a recent UNESCO World Heritage report found that Site C will put in danger the Wood Buffalo National Park, which is Canada's largest UNESCO World Heritage Site. So much so that it will be added to a list of World Heritage Sites in danger. And that is a huge shame for Canada.
Right.
There's also a lot of effects from when you log that large number of trees. A lot of mercury is released into the water stream. So we're looking at fish supplies being poisoned downstream for up to 80 years. We know that we can't clean up mercury very effectively, and that is also another effect on local food resources and local First Nations' ability to hunt and fish in their traditional ways. And I think a large issue when we talk about climate change is also Indigenous rights. Because those frontline communities are often way more impacted by climate change effects than other communities. And it's important to note also that this project violates Treaty 8, which is the treaty signed between the two nations in that area and the Canadian government.
Okay.
And those nations have not given consent for their land to be flooded and for their traditional ways of life to be jeopardized.
Okay. So you guys have given us a really good sense of what's going on in the Site C, and you've given us a really good argument for that. I really appreciate you coming today and giving us more of that information, the information that people need to know as they're coming into this election. We just have a few moments left. Maybe you could tell us what, if people want to know more, or if they want to get involved with your campaign, could you tell them what to do? More.
Well, one thing they can do is check out fightc.ca, which is our website.
Fight with an F.
Fight with an F, yes, because we like bad puns.
Okay.
Which has more information about how they can get involved, or they can get in touch with either of us. Our emails are on that website.
Sure.
But really important is for people to go out and vote in the provincial election, to make sure that they're attending all candidates' meetings, make sure that they're talking to the candidates about Site C, make sure that this is a major issue in this election.
Yeah, and understanding how it impacts people's individual lives. Our hydro rates are going up significantly. It's really hard for people to pay their bills, and this is another instance of misuse of taxpayer funds. And it's important for people to be voting for someone who has their best interests in mind and is looking forward into the future, into the health of our province in terms of climate, but also food security and human rights issues, and making sure that they are exercising their right to vote in a democracy.
You are very, very passionate about this, and that's awesome, both of you. I thank you very much. Today we've been talking about Site C. This is Brad Nickerson for Tri-Cities Community Television.
This community program would not be possible without the financial support of our corporate sponsors and community members. Tri-Cities Community Television would like to especially thank the cities of Port Moody, Coquitlam, and Port Coquitlam for their belief and support of community television. If you wish to be part of our volunteer team, become a sponsor, or make a financial contribution to support community programming, please feel free to contact us at the following location.